I just wanted to welcome everyone here. It's great to see so many people come. I kind of wanted to just open with an agenda on what we'll be going through because there's a lot of material that we have and probably not enough time, but we will plow through. First, we'll talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, and then we'll talk about complexity and cultural complexity, and then we'll talk more about project management and related topics there. I just want to make sure that everyone kind of knows what we're going to be going through. And as already discussed, you can ask questions in the chat feature, or there will be a Q&A at the end. Artificial intelligence. I'm sure most of us, are engaged with it to some degree, such as with Siri, Alexa, Google, self-driving equipment, chat bots, all sorts of things are out there that are utilizing artificial intelligence. Sometimes I think certain things get into the news more, and I also think that there's a differentiation between artificial intelligence and robots, because I find that a lot of times people associate, like a self-driving car or a robot that has some level of autonomy as what artificial intelligence is. But artificial intelligence is really just that concept of being able to make decisions, being able to offer ideas and thoughts and concepts, such as when you are utilizing maps or ways, when the system comes forward and says, hey, you want to save 5 minutes on your route. That is artificial intelligence in the background looking at different alternatives and then realizes, okay, that the initially planned route is going to be slower because of traffic or other unforeseen circumstances that then become, a recommendation that you as the user can accept or not. So, just keep that in mind. AI is just that decision making and that ideas concept rather than necessarily having to be connected to a robot or a car can be. And obviously that makes it a little bit more useful from a human standpoint, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Okay, next thing is complexity theory. I'm hoping that most of you have heard about it. It's become more mainstream in the project management world, but just making sure that there's a level of chaos that is allowed. The typical example that's been used many times is the butterfly flapping in Japan could cause a hurricane over in Florida. We also see things, for example, complexity when it comes to things that we do as human beings, and many times there are cultural ramifications. And I will give you a personal example of kind of how things happen. When I was growing up as a child, the our tradition at Christmas was that Christmas morning, Santa would come, drop the gifts off, and then Christmas morning you would wake up early and you'd run and you'd open your gifts and get your things. When I got married to my wife, I found out, actually maybe before when we were dating, I found out that their tradition was that they opened their gifts on Christmas Eve. And so, I never really thought about it. I assumed everyone, followed, opened up gifts on Christmas Day. And so when we had children, we had to decide from these complex traditions which ones we were going to keep and how we were going to celebrate them. And so with our children, they have, Christmas Eve is when they get their gifts, and Santa seems to come on Christmas Eve for our family when somehow they come earlier because we open our gifts in the evening rather than overnight, which happens for the rest of the world. But I guess that my children were okay with that tradition. They probably got their gifts a little bit before their peers, and so probably they didn't complain about it growing up. But as you can see, cultural and there's complex natures, and the same thing goes for other traditions. So let me go on. Um, okay, virtual organizations again. I kind of want to mention, yeah, there's some info on the slide. Yes, the leadership is different. In 2010, I wrote a book on complexity and virtual projects, and at that time, I remember, PMI was interested in it, and they put it in their kind of their advanced or a little bit more niche section because, at that time, virtual teams and complexity, were both a little less mainstream. And so because of that, I remember them going, well, virtual teams really and virtual organizations, only comprised of like maybe 5% of the organizations worldwide in 2010. And so, I remember when I did research on it, I was researching the few organizations that you could find that were doing it and the impacts that it had. So it was a much smaller subset of organizations. Now, what has happened is fast forward to the pandemic, suddenly everyone went virtual. Suddenly all these tools started popping up. Zoom, like we're using right now, was kind of not as well known or used, and suddenly became like one of the platforms of choice during the pandemic. And so now everyone is used to, and the little picture there of being in a meeting with multiple faces and seeing people, and I think it's great. But it was interesting to see how quickly it went from this niche concept to mainstream. So just showing you how things have changed. So I'm sure all of us have now attended many virtual meetings and have done virtual projects, and realize that it's not necessarily something that couldn't be done. It's just that people, there were fewer tools at the time, and it was just something that was not as necessary. Um, so going on to cultural complexity. I'm a big proponent of small teams. I feel small teams get things done. I feel whenever you get a large team together, you're more likely to run into roadblocks, and this also goes with the cultural norms of the organization. Again, always follow rule of law, but I feel as a project manager, it's necessary to take action. The important thing there is you really need to be moving forward, and in most cases, asking for forgiveness is better than waiting for permission, because a lot of times you're not going to get permission. And again, also remember that problems can be culturally diverse. Sometimes those are cultural issues, and again, it could be cultural from it within the organization, could be cultural from within the society, or possibly cultural between the different groups. Because again, as we talked about these virtual projects, people are no longer necessarily co-located, and so you could be interacting with people on the other side of the country, or in Europe or the Far East, and so there maybe some cultural norms that need to be addressed or considered. So this is important, when you're dealing with these complex teams. Okay, all right. Here we're talking about artificial intelligence and project management. I kind of had a few little statements here that I thought are relevant. First off, yeah, a number of years back, the agency, the group Gartner, predicted in 2020 that AI will become a natural language generation will be a standard feature among 90% of business intelligence platforms. It's now 2022. I don't think we're quite there, but there are a lot of uh, tools that are out there, business platforms being used. And then they further found in this research that this natural language processing combined with machine learning is going to result in more relevant insights in the context of data, i.e. trends, relationship, correlations, and patterns. And so I feel that this is already kind of happening, is already out there. I know particularly, for example, we can take a look at the pandemic. AI was instrumental in helping expedite some of the vaccines that were created to fight COVID. Yeah, this was the first time that AI was being used as a helpful tool as part of the research. Up until that point, it was kind of a nice to have. And I know that some big data prior to the pandemic was being mined for useful correlations. I know that in some cases they were finding kind of like these smaller correlations. For example, certain medications or diseases were impacting certain smaller segments of society. And so there was a lot more research being done into the human genome to see like why certain ethnic groups were either more susceptible or less susceptible to certain things. For example, I know recently, there was some research being done about, some of the diseases that plague us now how were associated with the Black Plague, i.e., certain individuals that had more inherent resistance to the Black Plague, hundreds of years ago and survived, have created were also associated with now other diseases that are a little bit more common because again, a lot of people died. There were people that had these inherent resistance, and so those people were comprised more of the people that survived, and so some of those traits were passed along. So things like that are really showing the things that are important with the artificial intelligence. um, I really also feel that things are different. Pandemic, artificial intelligence, supply chain shortages, and everything. The world that we're living in today is a very different place, and any tool that you can find to help you be more successful in a project, I feel really needs to be explored. And then, having said all that, being prepared for change is pretty much really where you need to be. It's really something that's quite essential. Okay. Okay. Current artificial intelligence decision making I thought was very interesting. I just saw this article today, and I wanted to pass it along because it's an interesting story, and it shows the use of artificial intelligence. At the same time, it shows the weakness of artificial intelligence. What happened was yesterday was a very somber holiday in Germany. It was the recognition of Kristallnacht, which was what happened on that day many years ago was that the Nazis went and basically persecuted Jews on that day, and so it's kind of a day of remembrance, and it's very much Germany tries to remember these lessons from the past, and so they had this. So because this is kind of we could call it a recognized holiday or day of remembrance. It seems that KFC went and created a bot that would then send out specials to to have people celebrate different holidays. So apparently, KFC in Germany sent out a advertisement. I believe it was out on Twitter. That went out and said, "Hey, why don't you come in and you're celebrating Kristallnacht and come in and buy some chicken." And so this went over really terribly. Like this is supposed to be a somber day of remembrance. It's very it's not lighthearted. It's not like for example, in our country, we have like Memorial Day, which has become really more of a picnic and barbecue kind of holiday. But there are obviously some undertones of, yes, we're to remember those who served in the military and kept our country safe. And so it went out, and so KFC's explanation on why this happened was that they set up a bot with AI that then would send out, kind of I guess advertisements for any holiday on the calendar. So I'm sure we have our little calendars now on our phones, and it'll tell you every holiday that's coming up, whether it's kind of a celebration or not, or if you have it off or not. And so apparently they set up a chat bot associated with AI that then was any holiday would send out some kind of blurb to try to pull in some business. Well, I guess no one really took a look at the holidays that they were talking about, and so this went out. Completely embarrassing for KFC. They apologized like within an hour or two later when they realized the error. But it's showing that even artificial intelligence that's been designed and set up to help us still needs a little bit of help itself, because and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, is that the issue here is that sometimes things humans are have to think about these things. It's not quite as easy as just to kind of like AI go and do their things and go on from there. um, in addition to that, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, the use of chatbots is another one in decision making. We've had to interact with them. They're also useful for editing, programming assistant, keyword extractors. In one of the last chapters I published, I'd utilized an AI process to go in and to identify certain keywords or repetitive words, so that way to help generate the index for that chapter as well as the keyword search. So there are some more mundane uses for artificial intelligence. I feel that some of these things are really going to also lead to using this kind of data for brainstorming when it comes to project management. I think as project managers, as I said, using any kind of tool that you have is really going to be helpful and is necessary. Okay. Okay. Artificial intelligence and risk management. Again, using risk and following risk is important. Using large data for forward planning, I think, is important. I know within organizations and many project or organizations will take a look at old projects, take a look at that data, and using artificial intelligence to help identify and sift through that data is pretty much more common now. Um, and I feel that this kind of relates to how AI is going to benefit people. I think that here's some quotes and some points again that are showing the usefulness and the areas of AI. For example, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel pledged $1 billion to the creation of OpenAI, which is nonprofit friendly AI to benefit all humanity. If you have not gone and taken a look at OpenAI, I would recommend that you do. You can set up an account. You can access it for some uses, and so it is a tool that is out there and can be helpful for you. So if you haven't, take a look at it. It's kind of evolving and growing, and it's worthwhile to check in every now and again. The other thing I wanted to point out is AI is already happening when it comes to certain things. Like we talked about chatbots. There's like automated phone systems. We all hate that, but that's another thing, and that also kind of can be used to manage risk because an automated phone system or a chatbot can help you determine how to treat risk by going and speaking to or interacting with those units in order to determine what you should do or how you should treat that risk or what you should do moving forward. There's also already stuff out there. For example, Alex. Don't know if any of you have interacted with that, but that is a AI math tool that's used by a number of universities, where you can go in and interact. And what it will do is it will learn what you're missing, i.e., what errors you make when you're going through tests, and it will then focus on those areas that you were unsuccessful on, and because once it sees that you have a level of mastery in a certain area, it knows, okay, you know that, but you're also going to need these other elements of mathematics to be successful or to pass the class. And so it will focus on giving you more resources, tools, and questions in that area. So it can be very helpful. It's one of those things that I think is really useful for a project manager. If you get like I said, using OpenAI or using large data is a great tool for risk management. Okay. Current again scheduling. Again scheduling meetings. We all have smartphones. This has kind of become a little bit more kind of like just that's just how business is done. There are scheduling AI tools out there that you can also use in order to interact with others to set up meetings. So it's not just you going in and necessarily putting something on your smartphone, but you can have an intelligent assistant go and talk to or interact with other people to schedule meetings between multiple organizations and then to determine times that are acceptable for everyone to meet. And again, takes time to schedule these things. As a project manager, we spend a lot of time meeting and discussing with people, so any tool that you can have that really kind of covers these things, I think, is important. And so it's something to keep in mind and to use. So okay. Again, as we were talking about, using like something like Siri, Alexa, or your smartphone, or these other tools that are available online, it can help identify issues in advance. It can try to remedy schedules. Again, it can help you even adjust timelines. For example, I've seen it where if you start setting up milestones on your calendar, you can start adjusting timelines and keeping track of those that way, and then getting reminders and again, utilizing it to schedule things to avoid conflicts and to avoid things happening together. And again, Another tool that I see that is being used is artificial intelligence to crash the schedule. So you can utilize it to say, okay, well, what can we do to expedite things? And it can make some recommendations that the project manager can then determine, well, this makes sense or doesn't make sense. Okay, this is where I get to talk a little bit about what I think will happen in the future with complexity, project management, and artificial intelligence. I see that a lot of these tools will eventually become combined together and create what I call like a 24-hour project manager. Technically, you could create an assistant, if you use technology such as a chatbot and AI, as well as other tools that are out there to create an assistant that will help you manage the project. And it's something that, could start generating reports, start interacting with people, start working on other issues. I think the other tool that it has is, now that we're talking, already that you can do some risk management and some what if situations. It can do multiples and keep looking at it. And the example I give you is with maps or with Waze, it is constantly checking other schedules, i.e., other routes, in order to make other recommendations that are a better scenario. So I see the same thing happening in project management, where you'll have something that'll be continually reviewing the project plan and then looking at ways to modify it or create it so it is more efficient. Just like when you're driving around, it'll offer a different road to take or a different path. I feel that's really where we're going to go with all these elements. Now, the thing that comes with this is that, once you start creating these tools like that, you start running into issues that are ethical. For example, I talked about that assistant that now works 24 hours. It's now, instead of just your smartphone, which is technically listening to you 24 hours a day, and could offer recommendations or where the nearest coffee shop is or gas station. Now it's going to be working on a project that's going to be helping a project manager that's also going to be helping people in a project. And so this tool is going to make some recommendations and offer ideas. And the ethical question as well, is it acceptable? What does the law say about having this thing that now is working 24 hours a day? And then the question, what happens if the project fails? What happens then? If it comes down to, okay, the artificial project manager, went and made some recommendations, say, okay, we'll do this, do that, and do this to be more efficient, and then the project fails, what happens? Or what happens if the decisions from a risk management standpoint, end up causing injury or harm or even worse, death to an individual? What are we going to then have with the artificial intelligence, and what are the ethical issues? Again, if it does become, let's say, an ethical issue, it could also become a legal issue. For example, let's say the AI was uh, obviously was programmed by someone. So now, are those programmers are on the hook? What happens if those programmers are from another country or from the US? Are those programmers more or less liable, or some more liable than others? It kind of goes back to the what happens now with the artificial intelligence of self-driving vehicles. For example, it's been made clear by the car manufacturers that the priority of the artificial intelligence of the self-driving vehicle is to protect the people in the car. Okay, so now that's all great. So we go in and say, okay, well, we're going to protect the people in the car, but then, again, it may then determine, well, the safest thing to do is now to drive on the sidewalk to avoid the accident, which then will potentially put people walking nearby at risk, potentially death or harm, which is probably not what a human driver would do. A human driver wouldn't likely go and say, oh, I'm going to drive on the sidewalk to avoid this accident. They will likely just get into the accident saying, well, I can't run over pedestrians, and hitting this other car seems to be what happens. So then what's the legal ramifications of this artificial intelligence that has been programmed to do certain things? You know, who's to blame then? You know, are we going to blame the vehicle, the programmers? We're going to blame the big corporation that made it? Or are we going to blame, you know, someone else? I don't know. So that's something to think about when it comes to the ethical issues that come with artificial intelligence and project management. And again, this is a complexity issue because, you know, we may make rules that are, you know, very linear and very much, you know, a either or, but there's probably going to be a lot of times where there's more to that question. There's more happening, you know. So again, it's going to be, could be cultural, it could be again, could be other associations or other reasons or to consider. Okay, so it's great. You know, I wrote this slide and didn't realize I was going to get a great example from that KFC one. You know, the need for human oversight. You know, really, it sounded like they set up the bot, they set up the program, and they just let it loose, and it did not understand or take into account uh, really some human considerations, because really, you know, someone should have seen this rather than you know, let it go out like that. So there needs to be human oversight. Another thing, you know, human oversight, you know, kind of the is true, because I don't know if you remember, I think it was about 3 years ago. There was an AI hotel in Japan that opened up, and they were using all these robots and AI that would interact with customers. And after about, I think it was about 18 months of problems and issues and horrible service and things not working out quite right, they eventually fired all the customer facing robots and AI and got people. And then they kept some of the back of the house ones that you know, for example, the one that could take your luggage upstairs or deliver food as room service. But they got rid of the human facing ones because it just wasn't working. And part of that, I think, was maybe AI wasn't quite ready for that. Again, customer service is something, when you're interacting with people, is really difficult. Again, it's only as good as the data you have, and so if you don't have enough data, you know, then maybe you need to get more iterations and more things. And then I also kind of see that, you know, down the road, you know, you see these artificial intelligence, but I see that artificial intelligence can be controlled by different companies. You know, again, we see Siri, we see Google, we see Alexa, all made by different companies, all AI backed through other organizations. And so I'm going to see that there's going to be large organizations that own a artificial intelligence, you know, backbone that will then be parceled out to people, like, you know, we do on our phones. I see the same thing happening in project management. Okay. I know I just threw a lot at you on three very difficult topics, and I'm hoping that you know, everyone kind of followed along with me and kind of got something out of it. I just want to leave you with this last thought. You know, we've come a long way with artificial intelligence, but we still have a long way to go. There are still very complex issues, particularly with dealing with interpersonal relationships and dealing with interpersonal things that simply just need to be learned over time. For example, you know, smartphones in the beginning would simply answer questions exactly as presented, but they have, over time and feedback to these manufacturers, have changed to be a little bit more sensitive. For example, one of the early ones that was found and corrected was that if you were to ask your smartphone in, you know, years ago when they were first introduced, and ask how do I commit suicide, it will very clearly give you different ways and different means. Now, what if you ask your smartphone, how do I commit suicide? It will give you information on helplines, on suicide prevention and other things, which is a much more reasonable thing, because if a person is asking in seriousness about that question, they probably need help rather than you know, an instruction book. So keep that in mind. You know, still a long way to go.
Thank you, Robert, so much for
All right,
being with
great.
us today.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.